dear friends, and welcome to our podcast Insight Reading Enlightenment, dedicated to sight reading through the lens of historically informed performance practice.
I'm Sebastian Mitra. Hello.
And my name is Darina Blogina, and today we have two wonderful guests.
My name is Anat Nazarathy, and I'm a flutist. And I arrived in Basel 6 years ago. I studied a modern flute master in Lucerne, and then transferred to the dark side and did a master in the Schola Cantorum on historical instruments.
And we studied together, actually.
And Darina is my dearest colleague, yes, from that time.
Yeah, it was fun.
I am Amir Tiroshi. I'm originally a recorder player and played a bunch of other instruments in my life to various degrees of success. Double bass among them. I'm into conducting and singing as well. From Israel originally. Came here about 8 years ago to study at the Schola Cantorum, where I met you all.
But we should mention, guys, that you have a wonderful ensemble that performed recently. You had a live stream concert. Could you please tell about your ensemble?
Well, we have an ensemble, more of a chamber orchestra called Ensemble Tsurà. Tsurà means form in Hebrew. Founded it about a while ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It started out as a sort of student project of mine, and then we expanded the team. I have two wonderful colleagues, Anat here and Jules Lézy, horn player and administrator.
Yeah, well, the focus of Tsurà is the performance of classical music to the range of maybe early romantic and romantic music. And it is an orchestra which plays on modern instruments, but with a, let's say, heightened sensitivity to early music performance practice. And it's interesting because the people of the ensemble are actually people who studied both in the Schola and both in the Hochschule. So it's a very nice mix. And also the ensemble has a baby, which is called Tsurà Baroque. Yeah, we play on actual historical instruments, a proper Baroque.
And we just try to import the vibe that we want to do with our chamber orchestra to a more intimate Baroque ensemble.
So today we have something special. It was actually your proposal to play this piece, Anat. It's a piece from Tafelmusik, Telemann. It's a sonata. It has a pretty unusual setting. It's for two traverso and a recorder and a basso continuo. What is it for you guys? How do you understand this title?
As far as I know, it's music that's supposed to accompany a meal, right? Tafel in this sense, table, food, dinner. Yeah, I'm not sure how different this music is to any other normative Baroque music, and why this should accompany a meal more than any other music. What do you think? I don't know. First of all, did I get the term right? I mean, is it... Because Anat, you said something a bit different before.
Well, maybe my knowledge is a bit misinformed, because I actually played this piece a very, very long while ago before I knew anything about historical performance practice or, anything in life in particular. But back then I was told, or I thought, that Tafelmusik is table music in the sense of a communal music, that you sit around the table and you put the parts and you play together to entertain yourself as players.
But this kind of image we have from all these consort part books, where you have the first page with a print on it, where people sit by the table and they read some music, they beat tactus, and they enjoy.
Before they invented music stands.
Right.
Just lay down on the table.
Yeah, but I think both views, both perspectives are quite complementing each other, actually.
Yeah, it makes sense because also Tafelmusik, there's so many different combinations of instruments that happen within the collection. It's like violin music and flute music and this flute or this flute, and it's kind of interchangeable. So I think both make sense. But then we were talking about if it is music, communal music, then maybe it is music to be sight read.
Right. Yes. Actually,
But is
finally, something.
Finally. But then looking through the score, maybe it's not so.
Well, I don't know if
easy.
the second movement
Yeah.
is. It is practically a virtuosic concerto for the recorder, so I don't know if that's very sight readable.
Amir, could you imagine pure sight reading with this piece?
No.
So you
I
really
don't
have
think
to
so.
practice, because you have played this piece before.
Yeah, a long while ago.
But it was already in kind of your muscle memory.
A little bit, yes. It's not extremely challenging. I mean, there's hardly any recorder music that is extremely challenging. Most of it works. Most of it is pretty easy. But then again, I can't imagine doing this really purely sight reading this. Because there are some moments that you might even need to practice, you know.
Yes, I don't know, for traversi, I thought that it's like pretty straightforward. Of course, there are some high notes, or of course it's in D minor, so we have a B flat, and in a fast tempo with certain combinations, it can be a bit tricky, but I think if you have this like muscle memory, and also you're used to those combinations, because with the traverso it's all about combinations, right? And then like you just have it, you just do it almost automatically when you see the line.
It's nothing to compare, for example, with the methodical sonatas, which really pose extreme challenges and are completely not possible to be sight read.
Sebastian, what do you think looking at this continuo part?
It's pretty straightforward. It's a bit silly sometimes. There's a lot of tonic dominant, but it looks like not a typical basso andante either. There's a lot of jumps.
Right. We should mention that the first movement
Is
has
in
the
fact called
tempo indication. Yeah.
Exactly, andante. But it also seems like I have the score in front of me, so I can see what you guys are doing, and there seems to be a lot of dialogue between the three of you.
Looks like it really needs like a knowledge and understanding of the piece. Like it doesn't work if you don't know what's going on.
That's true.
You really should prepare it, or like play it a bunch of times, realize what's going on, and then that really enhances the performance. Whereas something that is made to be sight read, I guess shouldn't have these qualities, maybe, or
I don't know, maybe because I heard this piece some years ago and I kind of had it in my ear, and the melody is so simple in a way, it's like a song.
I also think that, like, if we stick with this idea of conversation, I think the art of conversation was a lot more important at this specific time in the 18th century. And I think there are some practices that are kind of like rhetorically obvious and would maybe be recognizable. For example, arriving in the middle. So assuming that I don't have a score and I only have parts, I think there are some ideas that if you looked at the part and you saw that you had the theme in the middle of the bar, or sort of in a place that is not regular, you can assume that you're interrupting someone. Or if you have articulation markings, maybe you know that you're alone. Or if you have some figures, you can assume that they're going to be in thirds with people. I don't know. I think that maybe people were a little more playful in their gestures also.
They had some idiomatic models that they were following.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that's funny because I find Telemann sometimes completely non-idiomatic as a composer. I think some of his they're like Telemannism.
I think he's either super idiomatic or he's completely bizarre. Some of his movements suddenly have like a tempo angabe that you don't see anywhere else, or like spirituel.
Did he start
Mesto? Yes.
in the metallic sonatas? It only happens twice, I think, or three times.
I think it also happens in a trio for recorder and gamba.
Anat, you're playing today the flute that was probably built by Buffardin.
It's a funny question because actually there is, I think, only one original Buffardin flute that was found very, very recently. And it was a great discovery for the flute world because this model has a very nice projection, and it became sort of the new hit on the traverso market. After the palanca, which is actually most commonly misused because it's a very late flute, almost classical in fact, and I think it's a flute that a lot of modern flutists like to use because the mouth, the embouchure hole is a bit wide and they can push all the air they want and get, a nice fluty sound. But in fact, the bouffardin, the hole, the mouthpiece is still quite thin, but somehow you can give with pleasure.
Oh my. So what did you think?
Well, there's a lot of room for interaction between the voices, which is very fun.
Yeah.
In both movements, you mean?
Well, maybe in the first more, but also in the second one, I would say the interaction is between the two flutes, which are really paired together, and the soloist.
That's obviously a concerto for recorder with an
Right.
orchestra of two flutes and continuo.
There was a challenging place for me, like fingering-wise, in bar 69. Oh my God, so high.
There were a bunch of challenging places for me, as you could hear.
Right, yeah, tell us about
just
it.
Just a couple of places, that you just need to look at. I mean, you can't sight read this.
What about this idea of taking time when you're playing alone? Like, it wouldn't work
this
here.
This is actually the easy part. And more difficult parts happen later. Just a lot of fork fingerings and E major arpeggio on the recorder. I mean, I guess I should be able to do it, but like you need a moment, a couple of minutes to practice, you know. Some slightly difficult moments, but Telemann always writes in a pretty comfortable way for the recorder, which he for some reason like really liked and wrote a ton for. Mm-hmm. Like I can't imagine what would recorder players today do without Telemann. He wrote the entire repertoire more or less. And beautiful music.
I was just thinking about these two motifs in both movements. The first movement, as I already mentioned, it was so simple, almost like a song, and immediately like you are immediately getting into the mood. But then the second movement, the motif, it's not even a melody, it's just tiny motifs. There is basically no melody. It's all, like, for me, it's just an accompaniment all the time.
I just have like a very orchestral bass line. It's kind of the beginning of this, it's curious for me. Like the affect is like curious. I don't know. Yeah, there's something peculiar about this first boom, 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 boom.
Well, I think the second flute is very much connected to the first. Sometimes we do have like these nice complementary gestures, for example, in 83, but it's very textural.
And we have this special articulation, a very short one.
I mean, it sounds like an orchestral tutti. Like you play the violin 1 and 2. Especially
this unison at the end, right?
Well, I mean, it's. I think it started to be a sort of fashion in this time. I did my master thesis about the H-Moll sonata by Bach, which is also a very complicated, actually, concerto movement, the first movement. In the E minor, the second movement is also a type of concerto. And in Telemann, he has another one for horn and recorder, which we actually have a recording of.
Yes, also on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
With Jules Lézy playing horn. It is actually a horn concerto with recorder and continuo accompaniment.
Oh, that's a very interesting setting.
The recorder is sort of the tutti orchestra.
I think it's quite a standard Siciliano that we can see more or less everywhere. Also in other Telemann sonatas and in Bach sonatas.
But actually, there's a note value, I think, that doesn't really appear so much in the Siciliano, which is the 30-second note.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just a written out ornament, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it can be whatever. Do you know anything about like triple cadenzas at that time? Quantz, he describes this kind of a double cadenza and how you can build up.
For real? Wow.
And it's
I
very
didn't know
detailed.
that.
Forward actually, first like player 1 or player 2 and then another player, and then they play something together in thirds or...
Actually, I did it one time in a concert, like in a Vortragstunde here at the Scola, but it was super, super simple. Just a few notes, but it worked somehow, but I don't know, I wouldn't do it.
Spontaneously, or you can prepare it and...
Preparing it is a different story, of course, but seems like something difficult to
But I
pull
think
off
it's just
well.
a matter of practice.
But I think the main thing, what you could decide before, which doesn't actually affect...
Who starts?
Yeah, who leads. Because if someone leads and has a really clear idea of where they're going, if you know the models enough, you can actually follow. Allegro.
I can see a pretty intense line with a lot of fast values. And then there is a major part called Poco Meno Mosso, but I don't know if it's an original title.
Well, it seems to be in parentheses, right?
Let's play. I liked that Amir was leading the entrance. It was kind of very stable.
There is a Handel sonata for recorder, which the last movement is very similar to the middle part of this sonata. It really reminds me of this middle part where it's like a hymn, and the melody is somehow very calm, but the bass is a bit wacky. Yeah, don't worry, we can't do it extremely fast either.
Yes, also I had a question about articulation. How do you articulate this descending 16 notes?
In this instance where they're sort of going downward stepwise,
yeah.
It's a really good place for double staccato, I think, because always the second syllable is a bit weaker. Both if you use like do-gu-do-gu-do or diddle-diddle-dee. So it's actually a very perfect instance for this.
Thank you very much, guys.
Check out the link. Ensemble Tsurà.
See you next week.
Yes,
true.
We're going to talk later. It's the first time I've seen your face. Yeah.
Actually,
No,
now
because of the mask.
exactly. Now that you have a mustache. You have a mustache.
The death and resurrection of... I don't know.